G'day, I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline. Today is March 25th, 2025. I'm joined, as always, by my good friends here, Western Standard senior Alberta columnist, Cory Morgan.
Always a pleasure.
And Western Standard senior,
Very, very senior, and looking forward to the tax break that's been promised.
Freudian slip, perhaps. Western Standard opinion editor, Nigel Hannaford.
Good to be here.
We're going to be talking about an idea floated by Mark Carney today for an export tax on Alberta oil, Saskatchewan potash and uranium, perhaps BC light natural gas. Essentially, the federal government imposing an embargo on the ability of the western provinces to export their products and what that means. We're going to talk about why Mark Carney seems to have given some life back to the Liberals in the polls as a relative unknown to most Canadians. Are voters projecting what they want on a blank slate, or do they like what's really there? I'm going to talk about it. And the big kerfuffle over Danielle Smith, her comments to Trump and the people around him that he should lay off tariffs until the Canadian election is over. All it's doing is helping the Liberals. He should stay out of it. Does that constitute asking foreign power to intervene in the Canadian election? Most of the media seem to think so. So we're going to get into that. Before we do that, though, I want to thank our sponsor, New World Precious Metals. This episode of The Pipeline is sponsored by New World Precious Metals, based right here in Alberta. Years of inflationary money printing and rising debt have decimated the average Canadian's savings. Gold and silver are the only currencies that have held their value for thousands of years. Last year saw 30% increases. New World Precious Metals offers unique platforms to help protect and grow your hard-earned wealth with silver and gold. Check them out at newworldpm.com. They're a great sponsor of the Western Standard and the Pipeline here, and they would sure appreciate the business. All right. Nigel, the whole idea of a federal export embargo of Alberta and Saskatchewan oil or an export tax. Why don't you key up what Carney was talking about here?
So it was actually on a campaign stop. He was asked by reporters whether he would consider export taxes on Canadian goods as a strategy to deal with the tariff war with the United States. Now, Canadian goods, they're not going to be putting too many tariffs on motor cars or anything they export from back east, but they have tried before to put tariffs on Alberta exports. Namely, we're taking it back to the National Energy Program 45 years ago. And that was very interesting because that, too, came in the context of an election where you may remember Pierre Trudeau, not terribly popular, but he picked up this idea that he would stick it to Alberta and Saskatchewan to some degree and solve some problems back east while he was doing so. And it worked for him. So, obviously, Alberta objected to this highly strongly at the time. Nevertheless, there's a popular phrase used by Liberal bagman Keith Davey. He said, "Screw the West, we'll take the rest." And that, to me, seems to be what is happening here, Derek, that as far as Mr. Carney is concerned, this is Alberta's reasonable contribution to the fight against the tariffs with the U.S., but it's actually a kind of economic warfare against Alberta, and you know he's got a goal. He doesn't talk much about his green agenda because it's not a winner, but he wants to keep the Alberta energy industry down. He's still committed to emission caps, and this is just one more way that he can do it.
Cory, we've seen the screw the West, we'll take the rest strategy before. The Liberals, most of the time, play some variation of it. They might lean into it sometimes more than others. 1980, they leaned into it the very hardest. The Liberals ended up winning 0 seats east of Ontario. Precisely 0. And they were really just picking on Alberta at that time, but the rest of the West kind of got behind Alberta in the fight against it. But, Carney hasn't said yet that I will do it, but he's certainly said he's very open to the idea it should be on the table. This comes after Justin Trudeau was saying it. I guess there's two ways he could go about this. One is hinting about it, that he likes it, to try and get Easterners to vote for him against the West. The other is to lean into it very directly. If he does that, he writes off the chance the Liberals have at a few seats. I guess they have one in Calgary, then a couple. I think they have one or two in Edmonton. Yeah. One. I think he writes off those seats at that point. Which way do you think he's likely to go? One is scorched earth in the West, but might get him a better result in the East. The other one is to hint at it, maybe benefit from it, but then spring the trap after an election if he, in fact, does go that route.
Yeah, I think the place he's at right now is putting his finger in the air and seeing how well it's received and whether that will... I mean, they are cynical political players. They're going to do whatever they think wins them the most seats, whatever it's going to take to garner that support. And yes, there's very little to lose in Alberta. And if it can consolidate his support in Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, I think without hesitation he'll do that. The factor, and it's going to be a frustrating factor throughout this whole election, is it depends on what President Trump does south of the border. It looks like we've got another announcement coming, more tariffs from that end, more, I guess you could say belligerence almost towards Canada. And if that stirs things up enough, Central Canadians will be supportive of the notion of utilizing Western resources as a club to try and push back against Trump in the trade war. So it could be politically successful for him. So right now, I think they're just laying the groundwork. He's not ruling it out. He's not diving into a regional battle within Canada yet, but he's definitely keeping that as a tool in the toolbox, I think, as the campaign evolves.
Nigel, I think one of the advantages the Liberals have here, this election is mostly fought in the Greater Toronto Area, and then there's a few other pockets at play, Lower Mainland of British Columbia, but for the most part, it's in the GTA. We're expecting an announcement from Donald Trump. Many people, by the time they watch or listen to this, will already know what he does, but there's an announcement coming this evening, 4 o'clock Eastern, I think, on new auto tariffs. This is going to probably continue to supercharge things in the GTA that's got a lot of auto manufacturing. It puts Poilievre in an uncomfortable position because he, in his heart and politically, I think, does support the right of the West to export its products. Probably understands that it would do irreparable harm. This is not a short-term thing, putting an export embargo against the export of Western oil and gas to the United States. It could cause the United States to permanently reconfigure its energy infrastructure. It's not like you could just switch it back on when this is all over and it goes back to normal. This could damage it in a very long term. It puts Poilievre in an awkward position where he has to defend the West, and that would play into the Liberal attack line against him, which is he's secretly with Trump. He's working for the oil barons and sheiks in the West. He doesn't really care about us. He's not as strongly nationalistic Team Canada as Mark Carney. How should Pierre Poilievre respond if to this issue? I think he's been quiet so far because he doesn't want to talk about this for reasons we just discussed. If Carney goes further, though, and this becomes an issue where he has to take a position, how should Poilievre respond?
Yes, I can mention that's keeping them up late at night. Clearly, he can't afford to abandon the Western position altogether because, frankly, when Mr. Mulroney did that back in 1986, the Reform Party and the Alliance Party and the Conservative Party was the result of that, speaking of the F-18 maintenance contracts. So, if he wants to throw away the goodwill in the West, he will just follow the party line on that. I think he needs to come out and make a strong defense, first of all, of the Western leaders who have actually tried to do something about this and to take the fight to the enemy at a time when the federal government was totally unable to focus on anything other than the survival of the Liberal Party. I mean, going back to January and February here, when this first started to erupt, you'll notice it was Danielle Smith who was at it. It was other premiers who were taking the initiative, and that's other Canadians need to remember that. They probably know, but they need to be reminded of that. That we've been in the Western provinces have been in the fight right from the start. And they've actually did things when the federal government did nothing. Now, obviously, we're a party for all Canadians, and together we'll work our way through this, but he cannot afford to abandon the West.
All right, but how should he... Okay, if he doesn't abandon the West, how should he message this to Easterners who... For the, there's exceptions, but Easterners, for the most part, they're very sensitive to Quebec nationalism and sovereignty movements. They're not very sensitive to it in Alberta and Saskatchewan in particular. How does he message that to Easterners to say, look, guys, this might sound good on paper, but here's why I'm not going to do that? Doesn't that put him in a weaker position with Eastern Canadian voters than Carney?
Well, certainly it does. One thing, and that's the whole, the Liberals are very fond of this idea. That's why they're pushing it. But, one thing that we've all got to remember, and I'm sure Mr. Poilievre would remind people back east of this, the energy industry in Western Canada, Saskatchewan as well as Alberta, is worth about $140 billion. The auto industry that they're trying to protect is worth about maybe 40, 30, 35. So he's going to have to remind the government of Canada that they need to protect all industry, the valuable industry as well as the less valuable industry. They cannot walk away from this and say, well, we're going to put tariffs on, that'll show them, because it won't show them. And secondly, it will kill the industry in the western part of the... And I think there are enough people of goodwill, in Ontario especially, to hear that message and take it home. We often forget that although the Liberals tend to win heavily in Ontario, they don't win by that much. There is a huge reservoir of strong Conservative support in Ontario, and to some degree in the Maritime provinces, that will back him on this. They understand.
Cory, Nigel just talking about protecting all industries, and we saw just this morning Pierre Poilievre talking about protecting all industries, and especially the supply-managed industries. I had to go there. That means supply managed, for those who don't know, is mostly dairy, eggs, which are under a Soviet-style command and control economy with quotas, all sorts of crazy stuff. And, Trump is wrong on a lot of things on trade here. One area he is so obviously not wrong and has such a strong point against us. And everyone we end up in trade negotiations with bludgeons us over the head with is supply management. In addition to costing Canadian consumers far more than it should to buy a block of basic cheddar cheese, it costs us untold billions in missed trade opportunities because we have to protect that small, little, tiny block, mostly, but not entirely, concentrated in Quebec. Is this a ruse? Because Poilievre is a conservative. He understands economics. He knows it's a boneheaded, idiotic policy, both for Canadians and for our ability to get better trade deals for exporting our products. I hope he's lying. Is he lying? Because I hope to God he is.
It's unfortunate that you have to count on that. He's a pragmatist. There's one of the things, I guess, that people cut into Poilievre a bit. He's a career politician. He's looking at the polls, the ups and downs of what he needs to do to get elected. And unfortunately, taking on supply management is political suicide on the federal scene in the short term. I don't think it should be
for a few seats in Quebec. That's it.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're terrified of it, but it's also millions in donations. The dairy cartels are very effective. We've seen them lobby in nominations, in leadership races. Look, as a fiscal conservative, as a libertarian, I'm mortified that no politician has the courage to take on that rotten, odious system. Nobody can call themselves, and I've said it online, and I mean it with Poilievre as well. You cannot call yourself a free market conservative if you support that system. You can't. It's night and day. You're lying, or you are just covering up out of cowardice. But
You remember that sad occasion when Andrew Scheer drank a glass of milk on the podium?
he prided himself on it.
just-
I know I called him a name that I won't say on this show when that happened, but it's frustrating. It's the nature of the regional politics, though. Polyev knows better. I questioned him on that in this very studio during the leadership race, and he didn't like us going there even because it's a bad corner for him. And he basically, at that time, he said it would he said it was a bad system, but it would cost too much to get out of it if we tried to do buyouts like New Zealand did. He's not going to touch it in this election. And as you said, maybe we could hope he's lying, hope he wins, and that during his time later feels it's worth taking it on.
I have not voted federal Conservative in a very long time because I just haven't felt that they've deserved my vote. But when I voted for Harper's Conservatives in 2011 when they won their majority government, I voted Conservative believing Stephen Harper was lying, that there was a hidden agenda. I wanted the hidden agenda. Unfortunately, he was not lying, and I haven't voted for them since. I'm likely to vote Conservative this time, the first time in a long time on the federal level, only because I think Polyev is lying. He knows it's a terrible system, and if we are ever going to have a resolution to the trade dispute with the Trump administration, supply management is going to go. And let me tell you, Mark Carney is going to kill supply management. No matter who wins, supply management is going to die because there's just not going to be any resolution to this trade agreement if we persist in that because it is so obviously the wrong thing to do. So I think...
So you will not fight for the right of all Canadians to pay more for dairy.
I'm just not patriotic enough to want to pay so much more for my milk and dairy. I'm just not that patriotic.
Shame on you, Derek. Shame on you.
Elbows up.
And it's worked for people up, as I've shown my less than fondness of President Trump's tactics and actions. But he's exposed a real one here, but maybe it's made people pay attention to this particular time. If you don't like it, well, here's the one time he's right. And people realize, it wasn't that long ago we lost a big deal with the UK over protecting a fragment of a market of Canadian cheese. We're talking billion-dollar trade deals getting screwed to protect millions in Quebec cheese. So, I don't care who gets rid of it. I just want it gone. It's an absurd system.
Well, if they put a boycott against our export of Alberta oil, I think we have to put a boycott against the import of Quebec cheese. Big loss, eh? Okay. Well, we're going to stay on this track here and talk more about Mark Carney specifically. He's given the Liberals back some life in the polls. This often happens when you have an unpopular leader and an unpopular party. You switch out the leader. They often get a bump in the polls, but not always. But that, given enough time, we talked about Jim Prentice before. He had a huge bump in the polls, brought the PCs in Alberta back to life. But he had about 6 months plus as premier before he called that election, and people remembered that they hated the PCs, and he blew that honeymoon. Carney, I think, was smart to go straight to an election, so people didn't really have time to get that close of a look. But there is still a campaign period, and people will start to pay attention at some point. Our voters just kind of projecting what they want, almost like a Rorschach test onto Carney.
I think there's a bit of that definitely going on because, we look at it, political weenies like us who have always known who he was, okay, fine, he didn't appeal to us, but to the average person in the public, he does appear as a blank slate. The electorate was crabby. They were ready for change. Trudeau's levels were abominably low, and it turned around. Unfortunately, when people are ready for change, they want to see something different. They see a long-established politician like Pierre Poilievre, who's been in there for a long, long time, and they just see perhaps, again, somebody who's playing the game. They even if he's not fresh, Carney is offering a fresh face to them. And what do they want to see? They want to see a counter to Trudeau. They want to see a counter to the clown, the tongue-out guy, the vacuous statements, the colorful socks. Well, you don't get much more drab than Mr. Carney. And then when you've got that blank slate, you can, yes, project whatever you think you're going to see on it. They think they're going to see a stable man who's going to stand up to Trump, or a man who's going to stabilize the economy because he has an experience in banking and has understandings of the mechanics of it. Again, it might be contrary to actually some of the things he's promoted over the years, but your average Canadian hasn't looked at what Carney has promoted. So he's offering the facade of a fresh face, and it's working. And that's part of what's showing right now with Carney's campaign too, though, is he's willing to embrace whatever policy seems to be reflecting well in the focus groups. And if Poilievre said something the day before, Carney won't hesitate to say it the day after. And that's the frustrating part. It's working.
It's always dangerous to oversimplify things to left and right, and here's what they monolithically think. But they're useful shorthands, Nigel. I think the further left view Carney as a ruthless capitalist businessman who will cut Canadian jobs and move them to the United States and not pay his taxes with shelters in Bermuda, that kind of thing. The further right sees him as a globalist, WEF man who has written in plain language about some extremely socialistic policies he supports around global warming and mass migration, these kinds of things. Mm-hmm. But let's narrow into swing voters on the center left and the center right. How do you think the center left is viewing him? And how does the center right view him? And is it kind of a Rorschach test of their ability to just kind of project onto a blank slate? Or is it that both of them are seeing something that they like?
Well, first of all, when we talk about the people in the middle, we're actually talking about the mushy middle, where people don't look at what a politician says and check that off against their own set of principles the way we do. So in that situation, they see different things. And one of the things that they have already started to see is that Mr. Carney has got a little bit of a mean streak that comes out every now and then. It started last week with Rosemary Barton of the CBC and Stephanie Levitz, and they were pushing him on this important matter of what his holdings were. And he shut them down rather crudely, and he's done that to a couple of other reporters in the days since. I think we're going to be publishing an article based on a report from the London Daily Telegraph, which says that he has got a volcanic temper. And if he does, and if he is provoked, as he will be during the debates, especially in the French one, where he's not quite sure what was asked, but thinks it's something that's insulting, he's going to lose it. And over the course of the next 4 weeks, he is going to reveal more and more, not only of what he actually thinks, or what he wants you to think that he thinks, but also that character which so far we have only seen hints at. And he may be riding fairly well now. It's going to go down. The other thing to your point about savior candidates is that you mentioned Jim Prentice, and that's a positive example. But I could give you 3 savior candidates on the federal level who are total disasters, and one would be John Turner.
Oh, no, Prentice was only very briefly the savior, then he collapsed.
Yeah, well, he did. But then John Turner was supposed to be the savior after the very unpopular Liberals. He got totally wiped out by Mulroney, and then Mulroney being just as unpopular after 9 years. Like, there's a cycle in governments, as you well know, and 10 years seems to be about it. So they put Kim Campbell there, and she took the party down to 2 seats. And they brought Michael Ignatieff in 2011, thinking, well, nothing's going very well with Stéphane Dion. Let's try a public intellectual. And again, the party went down to a crashing defeat. So I'm not sure that there's anything inevitable about Mr. Carney being the savior of the Liberal Party in this, especially when we get to know him well.
No, I wouldn't say it's inevitable, that's for sure. I mean, as you said, it's going to be picked at over time, but that's where they're going to want to maintain that blank slate we're talking about. They don't want people to get to know him. Mm-hmm. If you can just keep him solid and riding, but I mean, this is going to be the most intense scrutiny he's endured for his entire professional career.
Yeah, I mean, the financial press are always very, sir, can you tell us, and then he gives them a very technical explanation that they write down and put in the back pages. That's not what he's going to get. when he moves further afield.
But is this enough time? Is a campaign enough time for voters to really get a good sense of him, for the Conservatives to be able to actually brand him and make their attacks stick? Or is it too short?
It'll be interesting to see if the media steps up a little bit, the legacy media, though, because they do tend to circle the wagons sometimes when they get shot at their own, even if they're the Laurentian gang and the press gallery. But when he got so snotty with Rosemary Barton and Globe and Mail reporters, I mean, they applaud it when he gets on the Western Standards case, but it's going to be some of those reporters wanting to make a mark, wanting to stand out, even if they're with legacy outlets. They might want to be the one who threw that question that got under his skin, the one that did make that mercurial explosion come about. They're going to be the one documented and in that news cycle. Don't forget the self-interest of some reporters, and they're going to be on his case now for this next few weeks.
Well, Cory, it only takes one really bad moment to sink the whole campaign.
It doesn't take much. I mean, look at the Howard Dean scream. I mean,
look at the mirror. It was hard. I had no choice. Take your pick.
He's got a lot of landmines he's going to have to avoid for this.
As for this business, I own nothing. Well, what kind of a banker were you? I mean, that was his thing. It was
something, and he's happy.
And
there's a nice.
Don't think it's going to last.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's bring it back closer to home in Alberta here. But it's become a national issue. Danielle Smith is in some hot water with the leftist parties, both in Alberta and federally, and with the media, alleging that her conversations with Donald Trump and the administration there constitute her asking him to interfere in the Canadian federal election. Why don't you kind of set up the cards?
Well, let's deal with that point right away at the start. The federal elections officer said she broke no rules. So that's an important thing to understand about this before we even get into the details. Premier Smith broke no rules in her dealings with the United States and with various individuals. So, the thing about Danielle Smith is that she's one of the few premiers who have actually tried to deal with the tariff situation at a time when the federal government, the government of Canada, to which we ought to be looking for leadership and guidance and, frankly, firm action, was floundering. They're totally looking inwards at their own problems with succession from Mr. Trudeau, first getting Mr. Trudeau to even agree to give up his seat, and then rigging the system and proroguing. Like, all that time, the government of Canada should be on it. They weren't, but Danielle Smith put a border patrol out when that was presented as the reason. She went down to Washington. She did the rounds. She met the people who could make a difference, people who had the ear of the president. She met the president himself, and she came back, and the 25% tariff that was going everywhere else was only going to be 10% on Alberta product,
and then suspended.
So, from our point of view, what do you want of a premier other than to represent the interests of your province? And if you are in the situation where you can't delegate that to the federal government because the federal government is like a car that won't start, then she did, in my humble estimation, the right thing. And there's this other, where the headline comes from was an interview with Breitbart. Breitbart is often described as a right-wing news outlet in the United States. They get their facts right. So I guess right-wing, left-wing, they get their facts right. But what she said there was that what she feared is that the longer this dispute goes on, politicians' posture, let me read this to get it right, politicians' posture, and it seems to be benefiting the Liberals right now. So I would hope that we could put things on pause. And I've told the Trump administration officials, let's just put things on pause so we can get through an election. And looking at that as a Canadian, from the Canadian side, you actually want a government that has the support of the people, won in an election, to actually be dealing with the Americans rather than people who are on their way out.
So the fault is she said, hold off on the tariffs. Let us have our election first.
Yeah.
This was her saying, she's quite clearly there, that the tariffs are interfering in our election. Stop interfering in the election with tariffs. And her saying that is being construed as asking him to interfere in the election by stopping interfering in the election with the tariffs. It's madness. I mean, if she's not supposed to do this, what is she supposed to do, Cory?
Yeah, well, the tiny little line she crossed, if it was crossed, was she did say it's benefiting the Liberals. So that's when you brought a partisan flavor into it. She said, it was by way of exclusion saying if it's benefiting the Liberals, it's harming the Conservatives. We want the Conservatives to win. Please back off so we can get a Conservative government in to deal with things later. But as Derek said too, what was she supposed to do? She's a Conservative premier. She's not going to endorse a party that wants to have emissions caps, a party that is threatening to impose export tariffs on our oil and gas products. She's not going to be a friend of the Liberals. I mean, some people might say it's a matter of form that you shouldn't speak up on these things or just kind of let things run their course in a federal election as you're a provincial leader. But we got to remember it's the Liberals that left us with a void in leadership. I mean, this interview is something that was dug up. The gotcha games are just getting started right now. And they're trying to do anything they can to, again, show Smith or anybody she's related to or Poilievre or anybody they're related to as traitors or darn, right in bed with Donald Trump. And that's if that's the best they can do, they're in for a long campaign. But again, what were we supposed to do? We had a prime minister who was lame duck when that interview was held. We've got a prime minister who now just won on a cakewalk of a leadership race going on. There still is nobody who really has a mandate to speak for Canada. So yes, Premier Smith's speaking for Alberta, and she's putting Alberta first, and she bloody well should.
How, Nigel, should Danielle Smith fight back against this? Because the media and the Alberta NDP, the federal Liberals, they they seem to think this is a smoking gun, that she is a foreign agent at this point. Should she fight back aggressively, lay low? Because at least the perception of it's not been helpful to the Poilievre campaign in Eastern Canada. Perception, rightly or wrongly. Should she be trying to fight that perception, or should she be laying low? What's the best course for her?
Definitely not laying low. I mean, if you have done nothing wrong, then you don't need to lay low. So her response has to be, look, nobody else was doing anything. I did what I could. And you know what? If I was in the same position, I would do it again. It is not interfering in, it is not electoral interference to talk to a foreign news outlet. It might be if you tried to finagle an official, but she's giving an opinion when asked. And I think in a case like this, if you equivocate, if you back down, if you seem to be, sorry that you found yourself in this position, when you're explaining, you're losing. And she needs to be very, very strong in just saying, I did absolutely nothing wrong. I did what was best for Alberta. And by the way, I think I did what was best for Canada as well, because Lord knows nobody else was.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to defang a cancel mob, and that's what it is, they're trying to get that mob going. Don't apologize. Never apologize. All you do is give them fuel. It's never enough. I mean, then Nenshi will be up there screaming from the hilltops, she must resign, she must resign. It's never enough for them, even if she was contrite on this, and she's done nothing wrong, said nothing wrong. I mean, Smith has made mistakes, but in this case...
But this wasn't one of them.
No.
I were to repeat, that is not my opinion. That is the opinion of Canada's chief electoral officer. She did nothing wrong.
For the sake of Poilievre, she should try and stay out of the news scroll a little bit if she can stick to Alberta issues for a while. I mean, just if she really does want to benefit Poilievre, she's providing that foil and distraction for the legacy media and the cancel hosts, though, so she could confuse a little.
Before we move on, I want to just bring one issue that we didn't have on our agenda here, for good reason, the NDP. I tried to find a clever way to rhyme Jagmeet Singh with Waldo, so I could make a good Where's Waldo joke. The NDP have vanished. I mean, the media is covering them, but it's just kind of obligatory. It's like the way you cover the Green Party. Oh, okay, well, Here's the kids. Okay, give them their moment. Okay, move along next. The NDP are flatlined in the polls. They seem to have no message that resonates at all right now. Is there anything the NDP can do to inject themselves enough into this race to at least try and save the seats that they've got?
Well, I think he's got to. I honestly am getting to the point of questioning whether Singh is actually trying to make a strategic vote happen and collapsing his own party's support, because it's been so bad. I mean, they have a base. They do have a base. The Socialists of Canada hold a certain amount. The Labour vote holds a certain amount.
They've lost much of the Labour vote to the Conservatives. For the first time, they're getting, I think it was the Boilermakers endorsed the Conservatives, for God's sakes. It's never happened.
Well, and Singh's not reaching out to them. He's not reaching out to his NDP base. He's just neglecting them and letting the Conservatives and the Liberals eat his lunch. But he could effectively get them. I mean, what do you do if you are a hardcore union socialist? And they exist, far too many of them than I like to think of. But there's enough of them and in concentrated areas to win NDP seats. And if they could focus and gather that support, they will win those seats, and they'll always hold on to that 20%. They're down to 10 now. But he doesn't seem to be trying. It's the only question now is it incompetence or design? Because
the a foreign agent of the Liberals.
There we go.
Nigel, is Jagmeet Singh a foreign agent of the Liberal Party?
Yeah, well, you know, if I knew the answer to the NDP's problem, I wouldn't tell them anyway, although I might tell you later, but I don't. So, but just when you brought up the matter of the Boilermakers, I'm thinking back to a recent Poilievre event. I think they were steelmakers, a pretty rugged-looking lot, standing in a human backdrop behind the Conservative leader. And I thought, well, okay, I can see how people might vote for that. The NDP, that used to be the NDP stereotype. But now, if you wanted an NDP stereotype, you would assemble a teacher, a nurse, a bureaucrat with some.
You go to the faculty lounge of the sociology.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they're DEI everywhere all the time, and I think most people are just fed up with that and move right on. So that 10% that he's still got tells you roughly how many. Okay, I'll be kind. How many people still think that way? I was going to say something else. So they've pushed their base away, and what they got left with isn't going to take them over the finish line. It's going to be a wipeout.
Well, before we finish, we have to take our parting shots. Cory.
Well, I want to highlight a bit of just showing again, as people get to know the Liberals or get to re-know the Liberals. I mean, again, don't let Carney snow you on this. And the opportunism and the self-serving attitudes were on such great display this last couple of weeks when the polls turned. And suddenly Liberals who had to spend more time with their family, it was so precious, so important, they had to set aside their political career only a few weeks ago because they wanted to sit with their wives and kids and cousins and whatever.
Just watch the results come in on the day.
And then all of a sudden, Sean Fraser and Anita and Ann, former cabinet ministers, decided, I don't really like my family that much, come to think of it, and I'd rather sit in Parliament and fight. And they've turned around. Sean Fraser actually displaced the Liberal candidate. And that shows the Liberals, too, elbows up, out of the way. We're making room for Sean to come back. And then just on top of it all, Amarjeet Sohi, Edmonton's mayor, who, again, following the polls, realized he was not a hope in heck in winning as a mayor again, has said, I'm not running this fall when the election's slated. But now he's decided, I'm going to run for Liberal Member of Parliament position, but I'm not going to resign as mayor. I'm taking a leave of absence.
So he's got to fall back.
So that way, if he doesn't win the seat, he'll still collect a salary as mayor, even though he's a lame duck mayor leaving for 5 more months, 6 more months. This is the Liberals, people. This is who they are. This is what they are. Pay attention to these clowns. Do not give them another bloody mandate. They don't deserve it, and you're going to get 4 more years of that from these guys.
All right. Parting shot from Nigel.
Yes. Well, you know, I often wonder why the mainstream media never pick up on any of the logical inconsistencies that the Liberals present. we all know, we've heard about nothing else for 10 years. Now, the idea is to get Canada's carbon emissions down. We want to get net zero. I think ultimately the idea must be that we don't emit any carbon at all. We hold our breath. Well, Mr. Carney has taken on board a man who represents the Century Project, and that's the idea of having 100 million Canadians by the turn of the century. We all breathe. We all heat our homes. We all drive cars. If we drive, electric cars, we drive cars that are running on a fuel that's generated somewhere else, because you're never going to do it with wind and solar. And so, just the very act of increasing immigration is going to drive up Canada's carbon emissions. At the same time, the main goal is to drive things down. It's another version of that wretchedness in which they won't replace coal-burning generators in Asia with natural gas from Canada, which emits far less carbon, because it might help Alberta. Screw them.
And British Columbia, the resource extracting regions of BC. BC's huge on LNG. And some people just don't want to do it there either.
You're going to put a little plug-in for the West Coast Standard, rapidly emerging as the authoritative voice of the West Coast.
Absolutely. All right, well, my parting shot flows nicely from Cory's. The Liberals have, I guess they had no Democratic nomination for it. They just seem to have appointed, it would appear, Rod Loyola, who is, let's bring up a picture of Rod here. Now, I served in the Alberta legislature at the same time as Rod. No one knew who he was until after he was elected, for very good reason. The NDP did not broadcast it. He was a card-carrying communist. He has, okay, that's enough for Rod up there. He was, I believe, a member of the Communist Party. I might sound like the House Committee on Un-American Activities. But if he was asked, have you or are you now or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? If he answered correctly, he would have to say yes. He was a member of the Communist Party. He's marched with the Communist Party. He even did a strange kind of prayer-ish tribute to Hugo Chavez, the communist dictator of Venezuela, when he died. He is the left call people on the right fascist far too casually. Sometimes on the right, most of them are communist. But sometimes we might use the term communist a little too casually. This is not one of those cases. He is a capital C communist, or at least was for a long period of his life. He was a rapper of not much notoriety, but he had a lot of lyrics in his rap performances about violent insurrection to kill and overthrow capitalists. If he is no longer a communist, there would appear to be no record of him anywhere repudiating communism. It's not like he's some former skinhead who's like, I was misguided in my youth and, I'm changing my tattoos and doing the tours of repentance. He's never done that about his very long, well-documented time as a communist. He still openly calls himself a socialist. I suppose socialism is a bit more of a spectrum, of which communism is a part. But when he was endorsing Nahi Benchi for the Alberta NDP leadership, he called them fellow socialists. I am a socialist. We are socialists. He is nowhere ever on the record that I can find repudiated his time as a card-carrying communist. And that's one thing when you were with the NDP, you kind of expect that some commies are going to sneak through the cracks here and there. He was in a very safe Edmonton seat, so okay. But this is the Liberal Party, which are not supposed to be communists. They're supposed to be crony capitalists. They're supposed to be maybe democratic socialists at most in the Trudeau mold. But they're not supposed to be capital C communists. And that is who the Liberal Party have running under their banner in Edmonton Gateway. To his credit, though, he actually did resign his seat. So, meaning he probably feels more confident he's going to win the seat.
Went all in, give him that.
He went full commie. Okay, well, that's it for today. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, you need to be. The Western Standard is one of the only media anywhere in Canada not accepting the Trudeau-Carney government's federal media bailout money. The Western Standard is funded by people like you. Go to westernstandard.news right now, click on subscribe. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year for unlimited access. You'll get past the pesky paywall, and you'll be supporting one of the last free media left in Canada. Thank you all for joining us today, and God bless.
What does success mean to you? Peace of mind? Financial freedom? Generational wealth? What do you see in your future? Investing in gold and silver can help you get there. Through our trading partners, New World Precious Metals offers safe, affordable, secure international accounts to help you meet your unique financial goals. Connect with one of our experienced team members. Invest in gold and silver today.